man, I hate this thing. Well, to be clear, I don't hate the phone. The phone's awesome. It's this thing, this massive James Webb telescope they slapped on the back, which you can bet your pink panties we'll be getting into. Now, as far as foldables go, this has hands down the most practical size dimensions on the market. Like when closed, that 6.3-inch cover display looks and feels just like you're holding any other 6.3-inch display phone, but like with a chunky extended battery on the back kind of thing. And I guess that's sort of where my first complaint comes in. I mean, even though it's just the nature of a foldable phone, it's just super chunky in the pocket. And of course, it's heavy too at 245 grams. So like wearing shorts with this in the pocket kind of sucks because your pocket just sort of bounces around on your leg as you walk. And like when I'm in the mountains, kneeling down to split kindling for a fire or climbing up a rock face, for example, it's been super annoying because it fills my pocket, which makes it feel sort of restrictive when needing to bend my legs. But you know what? It's been super solid. I usually let my phone sort of like tumble around the front and back of my truck depending on what I'm doing, which is usually bouncing around on rocks trying to get some epic views. And it's still in one piece. And the display has no cracks. And like when I get in my truck, I just toss it in where the shifter is with all the dirt and sand that seems to accumulate there as soon as I hit a dirt road. Same thing with my pockets. If I'm in the forest or mountains, there's always dirt in my pockets for some reason. But so far, no real scratches on the screen, and the hinge still sounds and feels just like it did when it came out of the box. I will say though, because of what I do with and where I take my phones, I was a bit nervous about the IPX4 water resistance rating. Like I'm in the Pacific Northwest and it rains a ton out here in the fall, spring, winter, which is okay, you know, rain shouldn't be an issue. But in the summer, I like hitting up like remote lakes and rivers and taking my phone into those lakes and rivers. You can't do that with this phone. I will say though, it's almost worth it because of how satisfying the sound and feeling is when you close it. So design-wise, obviously this phone doesn't suit my lifestyle, but man, I really wish it did, because being able to have my Trail GPS app open and actively tracking me with the music player open and playing on the same screen at the same time is like heaven. Sadly, I don't know of any car mounts that can transform from a phone mount into a tablet mount. So anyways, the cover display has been great for everything. Nice sharp 2400p resolution OLED panel, 120 hertz refresh rate, and a huge 2800 nits peak brightness. Now, obviously peak is reserved for HDR content, but I've never needed to crank it to full brightness outdoors. I mean, I did because why not? But I didn't need to. Now, the inner display, also OLED, also 120 hertz, also has 2800 magical nits of peak brightness, has an awesome, dare I say, perfect size 20:9 display ratio with a 2440p QHD plus resolution. Perfect size for the hands, perfect size for the eyes, at least for me. Now, the hinge crease is usually only noticeable to me as I open it, probably because I'm naturally looking at the middle as it opens, but once it opens, the crease usually just melts away. Although it's not hard to catch in the light, which is fairly often. But you know what? It's definitely better than like any other foldable I've personally seen, if that's something you passionately care about. And using it's been great. Obviously everything's bigger with the bigger display, which makes content easier to watch and articles or posts easier to read. But I still find myself scrolling on the cover display with apps like X, Instagram, and Facebook. That is until I find a piece of content I want to be more immersed in, and then I'll flip it open like a kid ripping open a pop-open book. But unless I'm out on an adventure in the bush with GPS and the map legend or music player open at the same time on the display, I bet most people would say I've been like severely underutilizing the inner display. For example, there's this thing OnePlus calls Open Canvas, and this is where you can do stuff like have 3 apps open on the display at the same time. You can swap them around, expand them, shrink them. Pretty cool stuff, but I almost never use it, so that's totally wasted on me. Anyways, it's a OnePlus phone, so of course we've got Oxygen OS with all the features and settings we're all well aware of by now, but something new is the main screen settings for the inner display. So yeah, there was 1 or 2 settings I didn't like as default, which I've changed, but yeah, some great settings in here to better utilize the inner display. Now, there was this one software bug I've dealt with a couple times that OnePlus has already sent out updates to address, where when you close the phone, the outer display goes black. It hasn't happened since the update, so Progress. Anyways, it's been pretty consistent at receiving security updates so far too. And of course, we get the OnePlus promise with 4 years of major Android updates and 5 years of security updates, which I mean, with it being the sci-fi phone it is, plus all that, it's kind of a future-proof phone, isn't it? Anyways, if you're looking for a phone that doubles as a portable gaming console with that sweet inner display, Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, 16 gigs of RAM, and UFS 4.0 storage, I actually think this might be a good consideration for some. The colors are bright and punchy, audio sounds great with the stereo speakers, and graphics can be maxed out with like no dip in performance whatsoever. Just a fantastic gaming experience all around. Now, OnePlus was kind enough to bless us with Sony's new stacked sensor 48 megapixel main camera, a 64 megapixel telephoto with 3x optical and 6x hybrid zoom, which uses both optical and digital zoom, and then there's the 48 megapixel ultra wide, all of which has been color tuned by Hasselblad. Unfortunately, OnePlus decided to stuff all that into this ugly disc on the back. Like, look at this gap when it's laying on a flat surface, and look at what happens when you've got it open on a flat surface and you're trying to interact with the display. Like, come on, that's just silly. And look, I know this doesn't bother a lot of you, but I feel kind of goofy when I'm talking on the phone with this thing pointing towards the public. Just sort of draws the eye, and I don't want people thinking I'm taking secret videos of them or something. I know I'm being ridiculous, but it is what it is. Anyways, the photos and videos this thing takes are so good. Now, sometimes I do have to play around with the exposure, but that's nothing when I can take shots like this. And even though the 6x hybrid zoom is using digital, the images are still extremely impressive, especially when we get to video recording. I did notice there's still some color temperature differences between the main and ultra-wide cameras. I really wish they'd sort that out. Autofocus has been almost flawless for me, especially after several software updates. Unfortunately, I didn't have a ton of luck with using the ultra-wide as a macro camera, so I usually just opted to use a 3x optical zoom, which is fine, because getting in close using macro usually casts a shadow anyways, and 3x zoom on this is so bloody sharp and clear, it's probably better quality anyways. Now, look at this 4K at 30 FPS video. Optical image stabilization is on point as I'm walking over rocks, and exposure transitions are pretty good too, still a little bit steppy, but plenty adequate for most people, including me. And that zoom is nice and smooth until it switches over to the telephoto, which kind of snaps over, and then it's nice and smooth again. But like, look at that quality, man. Like, you can actually clearly see the trees as they're being smothered by the clouds. The 20 megapixel selfie cam does fantastic too. Bang on skin tones and great colors. I am beyond impressed with the camera system on this device. I wouldn't even consider bringing a dedicated camera on holidays. This is all you need. Now, at 4,800 milliamp hours, battery life, while not as impressive as the cameras, still gives me what I need on the weeks that I'm not off-roading in the mountains, so about 6.5 to maybe 7 hours of screen on time. Now, when I am relying heavily on battery life, I'll get a day and the better part of the next morning, so maybe 5.5 hours of screen on time. Basically enough to keep me happy. Unfortunately, we don't get wireless charging though, which is suck for me because I've got all these bloody wireless chargers around the house now that I can't use. Deal breaker? No, of course not. Just annoying for the price we're paying. We do, however, get 67-watt fast charging, so if I plug it in before I jump in the shower, it's usually charged up by the time I'm out and dressed. At the end of the day, this is a power user's dream phone. The inner and outer display ratios are, in my opinion, perfect. And they're super bright with fantastic colors. You've got performance for days, a set of just rad cameras that produce banger images, and battery life's easily up to par. I think it's just a fantastic investment all around. But I think that's gonna do it for this one. I hope you liked the video. Thanks as always for watching, and I'll talk to y'all in the next one. Cheers.